Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Maqbool with you at PTV World. In today's show, we will be taking a look at two important aspects. First is in reference to the economic situation of Pakistan, in which, of course, we've been talking at length about what is the current situation, especially in terms of the IMF bailout package, which, of course, is something that Pakistan has still not been able to secure. And we keep on hearing from the Finance Ministry, of course, with reference to Pakistan's and the government's efforts in this regard, how the economic team has made sure that all the conditions put forward by the IMF are fulfilled and the reassurances that are needed in terms of bilateral engagements and money coming in from friendly countries are also there. But at the same time, of course, there is not a staff level agreement in sight, and the finance minister speaking earlier also referred to how this is something that he is apologetic about and that he understands the hardships of the business community, but it's not the fault of the economic team. It's the situation in terms of the restricted time that is available now and how the ninth review should have been complete by now but hasn't been. And so, of course, this puts a huge question mark on whether or not we will be seeing this package before the 30th of June. At the same time, of course, there has been a lot of talk with regards to default and parallels being drawn to countries such as Sri Lanka and Ghana as well. But we saw earlier and again from the finance minister that he has reiterated that Pakistan will not default and that the kind of obligations that Pakistan has, it has been able to pay off. And so this is not something that the world should be concerned about. But at the same time, of course, the economic indicators and the way that the situation is going points otherwise. And it's, of course, a cause of concern for a lot of the people in the business community and the industry and many economic experts who are pointing towards serious government policy decisions, which perhaps have also contributed towards the current situation. So we're going to take a further and deeper look in terms of what that is and how that situation can be salvaged and whether or not, as we move forward, there can be an alternative plan if we take IMF out of the equation. Our next segment is also going to be focusing on the foreign policy of the country. It's important, of course, in light of what Pakistan has always stood by, which is the fact that it is not going to join any particular bloc and is against bloc politics. And the Foreign Office spokesperson clearing the air also talked about how there is no such move by Pakistan to join any China bloc. China is, of course, an all-weather strategic partner of Pakistan and remains so, as are other countries which are, of course, extremely important, including the United States and the partnership that Pakistan has historically enjoyed with the country. So she rejected any such claims that Pakistan is joining any particular bloc. Speaking also with regards to the letter that has been written to the Secretary of State of the U.S. By more than 60 congressmen regarding the human rights situation in Pakistan and how the U.S. needs to act with reference to the protection of democracy in the country. She also rejected the claims that the letter makes and the light and the context in which it paints the picture, especially of May 9th, and said that the way that the situation has moved forward, the army and the security personnel and the political leadership of the country is in complete cognizance of what has happened and is, of course, making sure that it's taking all the measures required in terms of the consequences. Various other aspects were also discussed by the Foreign Office spokesperson with reference to the G20 summit in India, the situation in Afghanistan, and how moving forward Pakistan will be taking its relationships with other countries forward. So we'll take a closer look at that at the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi. We've also been joined in the studios by senior economist Mr. Ali Salman, and we've also been joined online by Mr. Qaiser Sheikh, who's lead at PML-N. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of the discussion. And let me start with you, Qaiser Sahab, because it's worrisome when we take a look at the situation at the moment in terms of what is happening. And of course, we want to hear from the finance minister that the situation is under control, that Pakistan is, of course, not defaulting, and that the policies and the economic decisions of the country are right on track. But as time is going by, and as the finance minister also talked about the restricted time, do you think that perhaps it is a cause of concern where the situation is going? And if we're moving forward with the kind of situation that it is and the decisions in the past, what is the government's plan to take this forward, especially if we look at where we stand with the IMF?
Today we had a grand meeting of business community in Karachi, and the Honorable Prime Minister attended that meeting. I had been emphasizing since long to the Prime Minister that we should have more and more interaction in this situation, economic situation. where we are not in a position to collect the targeted revenues in spite of all this devaluation, because import, there is a constraint in imports. And again, we are not in a position to allocate for the next budget sufficient funds for the development. So, and presently the estimate of growth for Pakistan is 0%. While in our neighboring countries like China and India, 50% of the total world growth is in those two countries for next years. That is the forecast. So we would have to make a lot of efforts. But the situation is that our currency has been devalued massively. There has been inflation about 30%. It's a huge inflation. Public in general are in a position where they cannot afford to clear that prices, the commodity prices and other all of the required food items and like that. So we would have to work very hard, and we are doing it. We are trying our best. Of course, the finance minister assured that there's no possibility of default in Pakistan, but still we have to struggle hard. We have to make efforts because at present the situation in Pakistan is not such, not as conducive that more and more direct foreign investment could be conducted in Pakistan. Neither the limiteds are also being lessened. So the problems are there. But you see, it is a good sign that the finance minister assured that we will arrange required foreign exchange, and we will sort out this economic matter uh, for some period at least. So I can say that today's meeting, the business people were agreed, and they said that there is a high rate of interest, and at this rate, to install new industries and to generate employment is not very feasible at present. So we are facing all these matters. Still, government, I feel that we should have more and more meetings. This sort of meeting which we had today in Karachi was very conducive and very helpful in finding out the problems what our economy is presently suffering. I think that we should find some solution with interaction, more and more interaction, because I know that the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, is making all-out efforts, and he's very sincere to it. And I know him that whenever he works, whenever Chinese visit us, they discuss, they still remember the Mr. Mr. Shabazz speed with which he was known in China with all development targets. So, Sana, situation is not very, very. We have to work hard. We have to make more exports. We have to generate remittances, and trying our best. I think hopefully
Okay.
we can find out some solution
Sure.
next budget.
Absolutely, and I understand that the intention, and of course this is not to any cast any doubt on the sincerity of the team or the leadership, but there may still be limitations in what we're achieving. And Mr. Ali, I want to discuss more of that, because the way that we've been hearing this statement coming in saying there's no possibility of default, I understand that's also coming from a sense of conviction that Pakistan needs to progress, and this is what the leadership or the finance ministry is trying to achieve. But at the same time, the way that the policy decisions, or the way that the IMF bailout package or the economic indicators, the situation that is being painted because of all of these factors, seem to be pointing towards the possibility that there may be something that can be a cause of concern for Pakistan. Of course, there's a limit to whatever we say is implausible. So are we at least taking the right measures to stay away from that direction, or do you think that regardless we're far away from that possibility?
Well, I think first of all it is important to put the right context here. Just a day ago we heard the announcement by the National Accounts Committee, according to which the economic growth rate has been declared for this year about close to 0.29%, or close to zero actually, from the last year of growth rate of 6%. Now I think that is the big news here. And while for the last 1 year the government has been trying to bring the IMF program on track, which means that government is trying to bring stability into the economy, stabilization, that is essentially bring the our external accounts in some balance, reduction of the deficit on the current side. But what has happened that we have paid a very heavy price to manage that external account, right? So I think the initial measure of intervention in the foreign exchange market, and secondly the import restrictions have dealt a serious blow to the economy. As a result, we have significant job losses. We have industries being closed down, and industry is linked with also the services. So a services industry, if you look at the report by National Accounts Committee, it's all unfortunately in negative territory. Now from there, and not only that, if we also look at the exports number and remittance number, they've also gone down, unfortunately, and per capita income has gone down. So currently, while we can be optimistic about the statements, but the situation on the ground is not very encouraging. And if you look at the announcements as far as the next budget is concerned, unfortunately I see the move towards extraction of more tax revenue from the current tax base we have. So I do not see a reform, in that, to be realistic, it is impossible to imagine in an election year. But I think economic growth, economic recovery, some level of jobs creation through the private sector should be the priority right now. But I do not see that happening in the short run.
All right. Farrukh, of course, the IMF bailout package was something that was a lot of that had a lot of emphasis, and of course, a lot of us have been relying on that to come through for our bilateral engagements to also follow. But in terms of what we are seeing and the kind of timeline, and even the finance minister hinting towards the restricted time, do you think that that is a serious possibility that we won't have it? And if we are not able to secure the IMF bailout package, what other alternative does the government have moving forward?
Right, Sana, and that is a good question, because let me start from brighter side of the discussion. Today the finance minister met the US ambassador, so we heard that perhaps there's going to be call for some kind of cooperation, and that might have been there might have been some commitment as well. Having said that, when you say, we had repeatedly discussed this, Sana, when you say that the country is not going to default, that means that you are closer to default than recovery. So I give you the example of someone, perhaps me, actually ending up in ICU, where every day doctor tells you, even though I'm vegetable, the doctor tells you and others around me that he's not going to die, he's not going to die. That is okay. That proves that it is not bad news yet, the worst news yet. But we are very close to that possibility. That frightens us, right? Right now, I understand this concern about the IMF package, and given that now it almost seems impossible to revive it, because as again I pointed out the other day, there is very limited runway. We are at the end of May, and end of June it has to conclude anyways, right? So there might not be that much wiggle room to get it through, because then you have to first get the staff level agreement and then approval from board. What happens then and how much time is left there, we don't know. But there are 2 or 3 things because of IMF we have been doing, and that is good news. That there was a fiscal gap, a financing gap of $6 billion. Actually, initially we were told that it is $3 billion, but then it became $6 billion, and Pakistan has acquired a substantial amount already. And today we were hearing about China's future investment as well to the tune of $2+ billion. So that would actually cover the rest as well. At this moment, as was pointed out, there might not be a fear of default, but we have to look at the incredible shrinkage of the economy. Remember that when you go to IMF, the purpose is to slow down the economy because our economy, such as it is so broken that variables don't seem to complement each other. For example, during previous tenure of Ishtiaq Saab, the business community kept on saying that you have kept the dollar at artificial height, and because of that our exports are suffering. And now because rupee has been in free fall, then one would have at least thought that textile is going to grow. And surprise, surprise, we have learned that it has actually taken a plunge and there has been decline. Similarly, car industry in the country. Similarly, when it comes to our exports in any other major sector, they are also suffering. So my problem then becomes that our relationship with A, business community, B, with international lenders is like an estranged marriage where wife or husband keep on threatening the other that I'm going to walk out any day. And because of that friction, things don't actually work out, and perhaps because of that, there's lack of cooperation. So right now, what I'm waiting for, and honestly, every common man is already paying through their nose, but I'm waiting for is finally to see what is the breaking point. Once that comes, perhaps things are going to get better because you would have actually hit the rock bottom. But right now, I mean, I wish we were a country that could opt for Swadesh, that we would have actually refused to import things or rely on imported items. Our middle class, not middle class, our middle income, class or people who are towards the affluent side, they keep on getting whatever they want. The poor or middle class or low middle class are being crushed every day. Because of that kind of circumstances, just go out and ask about the car's price, a cheaper car's price, right? Similarly, a motorcycle's price. Because of that, life has become very difficult. I still have to see, because we were told that, mashallah, Ishtiaq Saab is a magician and he can pull a surprise out of his hat any time. I'm waiting for that miracle to happen.
All right. Qaiser Saab, the situation, of course, the general population is facing a lot of difficulties, and the situation is, of course, difficult. And this is something that we keep on hearing from everyone. And I understand what you were saying earlier with the kind of measures that need to be taken and how, if they are taken, it can get better. But again, whenever we talk about measures in terms of improvement, they seem so fundamental and so radical or drastic in nature, despite their simplicity, that we don't really see any of the political leaders actually moving forward with them. And then also, of course, the kind of political instability that we've been seeing in the country for so much time now, it's nowhere close to actually resolving. And then the elections are, of course, also scheduled for later this year. And so when we take a look at all of this situation, can you possibly see any team of experts or people from the political leadership sitting down and making those changes that are needed? Because even if we take them now, it's going to take a while for them to benefit us.
Yes, Sana, it is a very important topic we are discussing. You see, presently our exports are not increasing, instead, in spite of devaluation of dollar, because normally there's the theory that if you devalue your currency, your exports increase and your import reduces. But it's not happening in Pakistan. So you see, and moreover, there has not been a foreign direct investment in Pakistan. And again, there's a gap between open market price of dollar and the official interbank price. About 20 rupees or more is the difference today of open market. So, and there has been a reduction in imports. Still, when we are not importing the required material, then all those is becoming more expensive and costly, and inflation rate is increasing. You see in the market, although the cost may be less, but because of the shortage of the product, the prices increase further. So it is a miserable situation, and we do not make a situation conducive to direct foreign investment at this low rate of our currency. See, in our neighboring country, India, I mentioned, the growth is huge growth. People are lining up to invest in industry in the neighboring, in Bangladesh and in India. But in Pakistan, you see, even although their currency rate is 70 to 75 rupees a dollar, and ours is 86 or 87, still people are not going to invest in our industry. So that is the main problem we are facing here. And the common person, you see, the problem is that the rate of inflation is increasing day by day, and we would have to sort out the solution. You see, the instability in the political system. Of course, you are right. We could not make any understanding between the politicians. There is a way that the talking point is that some national government or some government of the technocrats. All these options are to be considered and to be weighed because our country people are suffering. We could not
Right,
give.
but Qaiser Saab, we always end up talking about political consensus, but again, we have never really moved towards that dream. And because that isn't happening, are we not going to take any other measures for the economy, or is it not possible for us to move in that direction? Because if we put that political consensus aside, if it's not happening, then what?
You see, yes, you see that has been the problem in Pakistan. Since last 50 years, we have seen there has been political unrest. You see what happened in 1970, 71 war. That was, and after at that time we could not make the consensus. The leaders could not make the consensus, and we dismembered. Our country was dismembered. Then again, in when there in 77, the election results were not accepted, and there was a tussle between the parties, and there was imposition of martial law. You see, at present, we could not. Now, the situation, what happened on 9th May, it is not possible to have now a discussion or talks with the party who have done such a harm to our country and to the army installation and all that, those important historical buildings, and there was a loss of lives and all that. It is very difficult. The people are now, at a time it was considered that PTI is very popular. Now all their members of the who had contested election, they are leaving that party. Even my own opponent, who had been contesting 5 elections against me, the Rajoya family in Chanjot, Mr. Zulfikar Shah, he left the party. I don't know who has to contest with me. So I think at present we should find some major problem is that of economic. I
Right.
talked in National Assembly on 12th of May last year and said that our economy is on ventilator, and still at that time PTI was discussing about the dates of election. So we lost 1 year. They could not, our leaders
Absolutely.
from
And
PTI,
I
they could not.
understand that, Qaiser Saab, of course, there is a lot of concern with reference to priorities. Mr. Ali, when we take a look at the situation at the moment, and especially how a lot of the kind of assurances or bilateral engagements or investment that we were hoping to come in the country was dependent upon how our progress with the IMF also proceeds forward. And if that is out of the situation, do you think that there are possible avenues that we can explore irrespective of the IMF that countries will be willing to consider, and whether or not anything can be also looked from inwards, from within the country, from an already suffering industry? Can they contribute towards anything?
Well, I think the
Yes,
first part
no,
is important,
it is
that
very
what happens
important
to
point.
our friendly
You see,
countries'
you
commitment.
see, the point is
Right, right.
that
Qaiser Saab, I'll come back to you. Just ask Mr. Ali a question, and I'll be back. Yes, Ali.
So suppose if the IMF program is further delayed, or we not reach staff level agreement, then what happens to the commitments from our friendly countries? Now, so far, I think the signs are hopeful. Yesterday's we heard that China has already decided to roll over its commercial debt of above $2 billion. So that's a good sign. That means that even without an IMF agreement, at least there is some hope of managing external payments. This is not exactly we are not talking about debt restructuring, but we are talking about repayment or rescheduling certain payments. So as long as Pakistan and Ministry of Finance can handle those external payments which are due in next 6 months or so, I think we can avoid the default. But of course there is a bigger question, and the bigger question is that even our friendly countries now have expected and given clear signals that Pakistan needs to put its own house into order.
Yeah.
And that has been conveyed publicly and in so many ways in diplomatic circles also. And I think that is the message which is there. So the option is for us, how do we actually come out of this crisis, and then what steps do we take? Especially the part 2 of your question was very important, and that was do with how do we win the confidence of our own businesses, of our own investors, of our own private sector. Because unless we can involve them and give them confidence of continuation of business, then I think we cannot attract the foreign investors. Now we have heard from some sectors, for instance, tobacco sectors recently came up in the news that as a result of the hike in the excise duty, a lot of activity in that sector has gone into the so-called grey economy or black economy, which means that not only the private sector, the formal private sector is losing, but also the government is also going to lose its revenue. So I think this is where it is extremely important for the government to introduce policies which are stable in the long run, taxation policies, regulatory measures, and any other measures which can give the confidence to the investor. Now also at the same time, I think it is important that when we talk about exports-based industry, which is where we should be relying on in the future to manage our external and current and trade account deficits, then we have to give them more confidence. And I think the role of the exchange rate policies is crucial in that. Currently there is a proposal, for instance, to impose a fine on the exporters who are delaying the realization of their export proceeds. Now this may be a short-term sort of a measure to penalize those exporters who are delaying their export realization into Pakistan, but this is not going to solve the problem. We have to really go to the root cause, that why it all started. This was a problem which we did not face a year ago. So I think some of these measures are important, and I hope that the budget is around the corner. The government is able to make some important announcements for the business and for the private sector. I do not expect any major reliefs, to be honest, for the public at large, and I think government should not be looking at that. Earlier we have suffered a lot from these political statements, and then even 3 months ago government was considering this policy of subsidizing fuel for the motorbikes by selling expensive fuel to those who are the car owners. Some of these policies can be really unnerving for not only just for IMF, but I think overall for the policy signals. So I think government needs to stay away from these populist measures and stay focused on fixing the business environment, including the taxation policies.
Absolutely, and that's an important point that I'd like to discuss with Qaiser Saab later as well. But Farrukh, I also want to talk about the way that we have experienced the year 2022 also of course included the devastating floods, and they have impacted a lot in terms of our financial and economic crisis as well, something that was also part of our conversations with the IMF too. And of course similar events are predicted or expected this year around as well. And when we talk about climate change issues, I understand that globally we've been talking talking about climate justice and the need for countries like Pakistan to be able to get help from other countries. But do you think that this should also be factored in, or will it be factored in the upcoming budget as well, or the upcoming policies or directions that the country is taking with regards to its economic needs, especially also when we have another major event that's going to take a lot of money as well, which is of course the elections?
Right. Sana, regarding elections and consensus, I just wanted to point out that recently the statement that was given to Supreme Court of Pakistan by the lawyer of Election Commission, we can't actually say when exactly are the elections going to take place. I'm basing my statement on analysis on his statement, right? Regarding consensus, there were 14 parties, 13 were sitting in government, the 14th one was creating trouble, and now the 14th has actually self-destroyed itself to an extent that it cannot stir a lot of controversy, right? So I don't know what other consensus we need. I understand when Qaiser Saab says that in this country, in the past 1 year, the kind of instability that we saw forced many people like Mike Rubin and Indian pundits to start predicting not only collapse of Pakistan economy, but Pakistan itself. And because of that, any person who is ready to give you money stops lending to you, right? Why? Because they don't know how exactly are they going to recoup their own taxpayers' money. But now situation has changed, especially after May 9th. I think we should be accelerating in reforming the way we can. Now, the biggest problem right now, I understand that your question was about international commitments, and I think that it is the finance ministry which would know how firm a commitment is, whether you can actually include those monies into your fiscal planning or not. But my humble submission is that when it comes to, as Ali Salman Saab was saying about business community, my concern is that something is missing in our business community as well. For example, CPEC has been coming for past 10 years. And we now know that there are going to be SEZs, special economic zones. There's already one in existence in Gwadar. And what does my business community do? Billionaires go there, buy property, come back, forget about it, right? My concern again and again is that because of this interest rate that we have kept on hiking, and it has not brought the inflation down, but because of that, any businessman who wants to invest in any sector, why would they want to actually invest in that sector when you get more profit assured from the government of Pakistan just by parking your money in a bank? Similarly, when you talk about property, when your state, your government and state are constantly subsidizing your property sector, why else would I go elsewhere? So the biggest thing that you want to do right now, and I wish I had any kind of any modicum of say in this matter, and I understand that now when we talk about those businesses, we cannot even name the people on private television, and we end up calling them Ek Property Tycoon. But the humble submission here is that if you want to ensure that the economy starts growing again, first, reduce the policy rate. Secondly, also heavily tax the property sector. Because right now, till the time that exists, you are not going to invest in anything else. Why would I go for example, there used to be cinemas. And then people realized that cinemas are not going to make you that kind of money, but shadi halls are. So what happened? All of a sudden, they started demolishing all the cinema houses, and then we ended up with as many shadi halls as possible. So this obsession with property development has a problem.
Right.
You cannot export property. You cannot, make that kind of additional benefits from property. So you'll have to start shifting attention to these matters, otherwise you won't be able to do much.
Okay, before we conclude, Qaiser Saab, very quickly, because we're short of time, I was just going to ask with reference to what was being discussed in terms of the populist measures that governments or political leaders take. Do you think that this is a commitment that the government can make in the coming months, that it is going to prioritize tough economic decisions over popular ones?
You see, Sana, this is the time that we should think all over. You see, I still feel that there is no other option than to enter into some sort of negotiation with IMF. You see, without having contact with IMF, I feel that it is not possible to avoid all these problems which we are facing now. You see, our problems are long term. We had borrowed huge number of dollars and other Pakistan currency. Overall, it is 55 trillion rupees, and our interest cost is so high that all our revenue is eaten by interest cost. On the one side, we pay to some wealthy companies $3 billion, which is equivalent to about 85,000 crores of today. We give them on 0% markup and give free money for 10 years. And on the other hand, same money is borrowed by the government at around 20%, and every year 17,000 crores are being paid as an interest. Same money we gave free, and same money the government is buying at 17,000 rupees per year interest. That was in PTI government period. Raza Bakar Saab did it. So our policy, would have to have a new, more and more people to be
Right.
included in economic team.
Right, absolutely. I'm so sorry to interrupt, Qaiser Saab, but we're short of time. Yes, Mr. Ali, very quickly if you want to add something.
Just a quick point response to, I think, the real estate. I totally agree with Farrukh that it needs to be really taxed equivalent to other sectors of the economy. But maybe an additional point is that while we cannot export the real estate sector, but it can be a sector where we can attract FDI and generate economic activity.
Yeah. Can I very quickly answer that as well?
And one last question for Qaiser Sheikh Sahab I wanted to leave, and that is that we have been hearing about the $3 billion given at zero interest rate or very low interest rate, but we'd like to hear from the government, now they're in the government, more details of the beneficiaries of that scheme, and like to hear what kind of impact assessment and what are the results of that loan which these companies have utilized.
One sentence, Sana,
Yes.
just to answer the aspect about FDI attraction through property. Value addition and wealth creation always take place when you are creating something which is out of the limited resources, but which means much more. The problem with any country's territory is that it is always limited. No matter how big a country, someday it will run out. So, and it will be at the cost of what? Agriculture, so many other things. Why do we have to obsess about something which is limited? Why not actually focus on something which can be unlimited?
All right. Yes, Qaiser Saab, very quickly. Qaiser Saab, can you hear me? I think, unfortunately, we are not in contact with Qaiser Saab, but we'll keep this question noted, and the next time he joins us, perhaps we can get this information from himself. But thank you very much for joining us and speaking to us with regards to the economic conditions and what is going on in the country. We're also now going to be taking a look at what is happening in terms of the Foreign Office and the foreign policy relations of the country, particularly in terms of the kind of references that are being made towards Pakistan joining a particular bloc, which is being called as the China bloc, as opposed to the US. Of course, something that is rejected by the Foreign Office spokesperson, but it is important to note in terms of how we are proceeding, whether or not this is going to impact how we affect the relationship between various countries. And regarding this, Farrukh, I want to understand in terms of where we stand, that this is something that Pakistan has always reiterated and spoken about, how it is not going to join any particular bloc, and that it always values its relationships with all the friendly countries. And that is important, especially in terms of the way that Pakistan wants to proceed with its foreign policy situation. What do you make of, first of all, these statements coming towards Pakistan with reference to its China bloc, and the way that Pakistan will then be able to balance its all-weather strategic partnership with China and its valuable relationship with the US as well? And before you answer, let me just welcome in the show Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, who's Member Planning Commission, who's joined us online. Thank you very much, Dr. Ishtiaq, for being a part of the show. Farrukh, you can answer that, and I'll go to Dr. Ishtiaq.
May I request you to first ask his take, and then I can add to that discussion, if you don't mind. Otherwise, I can continue.
That's all right. Dr. Ishtiaq, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, Dr. Ishtiaq, with reference to what is being discussed in terms of the foreign policy options for Pakistan, can you also highlight in terms of the way that Pakistan will be able to balance its relationship with China and the US, particularly the kind of statements that are being made regarding Pakistan joining a China bloc, again something rejected previously also and again by the Foreign Office spokesperson?
Well, I think the spokesperson of the Pakistan Foreign Office, his statement is being quoted out of context. I think the report concerned dealt with the human rights issue, and even if there are some direct remarks made about that Pakistan is not part of the China bloc, it was only with reference to that report. Although in the remarks which continued in her statement, it was emphasized that there is a strategic partnership between China and Pakistan. If you ask me my opinion, you see, Pakistan perceives its relations with great powers as mutually inclusive. So it's not a question of joining the American bloc or the Chinese bloc. Pakistan wants to have a diversified foreign policy in which the United States, being our strategic partner for many, many years and many issues in the past 76 years, is a very major factor. And we are not going to overlook that. Simultaneously, things change over time. With China, we have a all-weather, consistent strategic ties which underwent a major transformation from defense to economic relations in the past 20 years. CPEC is the highlight of that. And I think we will also capitalize upon the opportunities offered by this geoeconomics-centric transformation in global politics taking place right before our eyes. However, simultaneously, we would also be interested in cultivating deep relations with the United States and Europe and other countries for that matter.
Right. And Dr. Ishtiaq, so does that mean that when we talk about the relationship and the balance between our relationship with the US and China, that the US will have no concerns or does have no concerns with reference to Pakistan and China's deep ties?
Well, the thing is, for us, the framework is not zero-sum. The framework for us is win-win. So in which we also try always to persuade the United States and Europe and other countries in the West that, it is extremely important to opt for opportunities, which are presented by rising powers in Asia. And we do not seek any kind of a confrontation, that the confrontation, whatever it is taking place in Asia Pacific between China or the United States, does not concern us, and we are just focused upon, regional, integration, regional prosperity, and we would like to, behave like a responsible state which only caters to the well-being of its own population and the well-being of the people and the nations which are surrounding us. And I think in the larger geoeconomic, futuristic world that is emerging, we place ourselves in that. That does not mean that we are cutting off our ties with the United States and Europe. US is our, the biggest market for us. Europe offers us exclusive, facilities in terms of our international trade. China is an emerging power, and I think it is making a huge difference in the Gulf and the Middle East. And we would like to be part of this, web of inter-regional, opportunities that are emerging.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Dr. Ishtiaq Ahmed, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. Farrukh, of course, the Foreign Office spokesperson also spoke about the letter that a large number of congressmen have written to the US Secretary of State, and they've highlighted the need to take a closer look at Pakistan's human rights situation and the protection of democracy. And this may have been, of course, linked with the incidents of May 9th as well, which the Foreign Office spokesperson said have been quoted out of context, or there's not an understanding of what's going on. But what do you make in terms of the way that this is being interpreted in the US or by the US congressmen, and the way that they're looking at the situation? Do you think that the statement coming in from our Foreign Office has clarified that sentiment that is perhaps there?
Right. Sana, I think that it is not about sentiment, it is about lobbying. The way Washington works is that whosoever has better lobbyists or better influence with the lawmakers, they actually manage to get away with whatever they want. And this is what we have been seeing, that PTI's international component has been very active, and they have actually hired very expensive lobbyists as well, and they have done their job. This is precisely how they are being told the story, and that's how they have actually ensured that they are going to write a letter. But humbly speaking, US lawmakers might have an oversight role when it comes to confirmation of certain officers or appropriations or similar kind of policies. But the US has the trichotomy very clear. Their executive branch actually makes the policy, and that policy continues without any problem, right? So at this moment, I'm not worried how many lawmakers, especially when it is not about senators, when it is essentially House members, because Senate still has some say in the foreign policy. The House can say whatever it wants, but at this moment it is dominated by the opposition party, and they keep on doing whatever they can to weaken the ruling government as well. I wanted to qualify why I asked Dr. Ishtiaq to speak first, and that is out of respect for a teacher. I thought that if I start talking, you will always have, will have difficulty in putting brakes, so better he speak first. But I wanted to actually talk about, with your permission, this bloc politics as well.
Right.
I think that most of it is whatever we keep on hearing about an impending conflict between China and US is a lot of exaggeration, a lot of hooey. Because they are, again, everybody keeps on lobbying. India has a great voice, and they keep on doing that as well. But in India, for example, India has not decided to take a side. It wants to have good relations with China as well. So Pakistan is a medium power, medium range power with a struggling economy. Why would anybody want it to sever its ties or actually disconnect from one set of benefactors?
Right.
So we can actually work with all. We have very good relations with China. It is brotherly relationship. The US also is very close to us. So
Absolutely.
I think that this. You want me to conclude?
Yes, actually, we're short on time, so
Okay.
we're just going to end here. But thank you very much for your comments, and thank you everyone who's joined and been part of the discussion. That's all that we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.